And that should do it. We should be live. Hey, Justice fans and Custa fans. Maybe this is like one of the first diverse fan bases that we've pulled in. Usually people are here just to see the Justice talking heads. But today we're joined by Custa, who all of you should know. Custa, previous player in the Overwatch League, and now has run the gauntlet as an analyst, is on the desk. Weatherman, I think occasionally we've seen whispers.
Some great accents in there every now and then.
I mean, I can't believe that they have to ask you to change your accent. I mean, great default accent. Let's just roll with that, right? Like,
yeah, that's what I said. It's like, can I be Australian? They're like, no, that's not interesting. I'm like, well, I don't have anything else, so I've just been winging it ever since.
That's fantastic. And the desk has been great. One of the big things I wanted to talk about with Custa today in the preview is the format changes to the league. I mean, who better to talk about? Someone that really gets to see the production side. I've been really positive and really happy about a lot of the changes that have happened on the team side. I tweeted a little bit today about how some of those schedule changes are impacting us. So I'd love to talk about that. But also, I think the desk has been fantastic. We've talked about I think we've already gotten over it, but like the face cams were very cool this year. The 4K video that we had, and then they're taking it away, but it's coming back.
It's all up in the air at this point.
Yeah, you know, we're A/B testing. Like, did viewership go down? Is anyone actually watching? Does anyone actually have bandwidth to watch 4K? Probably not. Like,
stopping and starting left and right every time I'm on 4K. But it's been cool to have it at 4K, because when you do get to watch it, it's actually so crisp and it's really nice. So yeah, I actually really like the YouTube player, as you said. Like, that's a different topic entirely, talking about Twitch versus YouTube and all that kind of stuff. But I actually love watching videos, especially live content on YouTube, because you can actually like live pause it and start it again. I think we've all been there when you're on a Twitch stream and you have to go back into the VOD to watch it back. It's a nightmare. So I think, yeah, it's been really cool having that YouTube like sort of player for because it's especially in a game like Overwatch where everything happens so fast. I think it's really nice.
Yeah, and especially this year. I mean, that's another thing that like there's like, you know, little qualms that I have about like the structure this year. But with COVID, I cannot even imagine having to go back and watch all of the APAC videos on Twitch. Like, I would just give up. I would just be like, GG's. Yeah. Like, it is a Western Division only league for me this year. So that's, you know, in the COVID year, not a bad time to have the nicer playback options.
Yeah, exactly right.
Cool. So yeah, so for those of you that haven't joined us before, this is the preview presented by DC Brau. So this is our sponsor here. We got some of these to you, right, Custa? You did a shoe with one of these, I think.
I've drunk one of those out of a shoe, so I've seen it's been through all the elements for me. But yeah, no, it's a really good beer. So I would buy that lager like anywhere. So it's a good time.
Yeah, and we're happy to do these kind of every other week updates with the team. It's you know, it's a local beer. We get kind of like a local kind of chance to kind of have a bit of a fireside chat. So let's hop into it. And as always in chat, guys, I am not the professional streamer that Custa is. So if you can't hear him or you can't hear me, or like the little like lo-fi music that I try to put in the background is too loud, just like yell at me in chat, and we'll try and get at questions in there. If we have time, we're gonna try and keep it to about an hour. Because I know Custa is busy, and we have games this weekend I'm preparing for. So.
Oh yeah, we do. Washington Justice weekend. I have big expectations for you guys coming into this meta. So.
Yeah, I think it's a really good meta for us. I also think we have one of the tougher schedules coming into the Summer Showdown. We're going to be opening with Atlanta, who I think is going to be, you know, able to run a really strong rush, I'm assuming. And they have like some other things that, I mean, coming out of a trip to Hawaii. We're going to see Florida, so we're going to get to see that first-hand look at the main tank swap there, which, you know, I mean, I think Albert hit it on the head. You know, it's one of those things where if you want to make a change mid-season at one of the most pivotal roles for NA teams, there's not a lot of options. So credit to them for, you know, taking a swing at it, and we'll see how that goes.
Yeah. Oh, I'm sure Mag will be the test for Checkmate. We'll see how Checkmate matches up.
Their first two matches are Dallas and us, so it's Checkmate versus Fearless and the Checkmate versus Mag. It's gonna be trial by fire for the man.
Good luck. That's all I'll say.
But it's gonna be good, and I think. I mean, one of the exciting things for this format, right, is that you kind of get to try things a little bit new. I think one of the things that, I mean, Custa's been in the league since, you know, the very beginning, so who better to talk to about the ups and downs of like the current format that we have, and the fact that when we get these kind of little patch resets where the meta changes and you can try something new, you can try someone on a different role, you can try different play styles. So what how have you felt? I mean, I guess from both as a, I mean, you get all the perspective. You can talk about it as a player. You can talk about it as like an analyst, because I imagine that it also has impacted like how it feels to be on the desk. And in particular, one of the things I've struggled with when I try and pull stats is like smaller sample sizes. So you guys, I think, get less opportunities to kind of compare back and be like, oh, let's compare this to like 2 weeks ago, because maybe 2 weeks ago we were basically playing a different game. So,
yeah. And that's the issue right now with like hero pool. I love the diversity that hero pools add, because of just, you know, like if we were here and we were still playing the melee patch and we were still doing that, we would have standardized to something already at the end of that. We were all seeing that from Dallas Fuel and everyone was copying that. So it's like, it's cool to be able to see the hero pools change it. It does make it more chaotic. Just, you know, the first couple of weeks is just everyone scrambling to find whatever will win the matches. Like even this most recent weekend we saw in the Eastern region, they're playing a lot of Wrecking Ball, Brig, Zen, but we didn't see a little bit of that at all in the West. And then we're just, in the West, we're just mixing between either playing the Brawl or playing that like Winston Anna dive. So it's all up in the air, and eventually it'll come out in the wash. Teams will standardize, but as you said, teams can get wins. Teams can get like match wins. I think Boston had a great read on the meta and something that plays around them very well, and that's how they got 2 wins. So it's variable, but it's cool to see.
Yeah, and especially like these middle tier teams, like Paris is in there, Boston's in there. The Justice. I mean, we can even talk about like the Justice's season. I think we probably wanted to be a little bit higher in the rankings than we are right now. I think this is going to be a good chance for us, hopefully, to catch up. But yeah, it's definitely interesting, especially in that first week to see. And that, well, I mean, what do you think as a player? Like, does that come down to, if you had to like put that into a bucket, does that come down more to players or coaching? If like the first week when like you're first kind of figuring out that meta.
I think it really depends on the team that you play, because I played on different teams which had very different like levels of influence. So I played on the first Dallas Fuel, and in the first Dallas Fuel, we didn't actually really have any coaches for the most part. Like Kai was like the only coach, so we're just working it out as players. When we went to Valiant, we had Goomba, we had Moon, we had Stoop. And it was more of a discussion between everyone. And I know there are a lot of teams like that, where some teams are very open discussion between the coaches and the players. Sometimes the coaches are more heavy-handed. Sometimes the coaches aren't even really in that conversation at all. So it does depend on the team that you're playing around. And it's really hard. Like we've all seen meta changes, massive meta changes, and just scrambling to see what works, because especially when you're scrimming with all these teams, right? Sometimes the people that you're scrimming with come to some conclusion, and then you're scrimming against other teams, or not scrimming against other teams, and they're playing something completely different. Yeah. So it's just like, then you get into the match and you're like, I've never seen this before and I have no idea what's going on. And it's really just sort of winging it at that point. And that's what you see in these opening weekends.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And that's the crazy things. I think like I've talked about on previous streams is that, you know, most teams will stop scrimming the teams they plan on playing like a week or two out, which in this format means you basically just like don't play them in that meta. So yeah, they could just come out with something totally different that like, if you're lucky, you've heard whispers of from, you know, a friend of a friend. And like, that's one of the things in like Overwatch League. Like, I wish it's hard. I've talked about the fact that it's not like basketball or football where like, if we want someone to get better at shooting a three, we can just put them in a closed gym and have them shoot 100 threes. If we want to like try something new, or we want to like see if we figure something out, you gotta show it to someone. Like you gotta. And
you can't do it against contenders teams either, right? Because you have to do it against an Overwatch League team, because like, you need.
Did it work to contenders, or did it work?
Yeah. I can play, like, when I was a player, like, there are some great contenders teams, but we could generally play whatever we want and would probably win. And that's just that gap. So you have to, as you said, you have to play it against an Overwatch League team. And there's a lot of friends and a lot of circles about who talk to each other. And it's impossible to really keep your strats completely to your chest. So there is a lot of that going back and forth. I thought actually it was really interesting as well. I had this discussion with someone recently about the value of not playing the first week in these tournaments, because you guys, as an example, right, Washington Justice didn't have to play this most recent weekend. Huge. You get to see what everyone else plays, and you'll be like, oh, okay, we had a great read on the meta. We were playing this, and this got dominated by this team, and they were playing this meta. So you get to see and sort of adjust over that week. And it's kind of interesting to see the advantages that would have in like a long format. As you said, sample sizes are hard right now.
Yeah.
But it's, you know, it would be interesting if you looked at it over a long time.
Yeah, and I think that's a great kind of thing to talk about in this format as well, is the total number of games. I think, again, like both of us having been in the league for a while, looking at everything from like, what was the max? Was 28? Was 28 the most that we got to?
40 in the first one.
That was
season.
Yeah.
brutal, I'll tell you that. I played that. It was a long time.
Yeah, I joined like midway through. That's when I was with like Nixel, but I was also doing like, I was like an analyst. So I was like, wow, look at all the data. And like, I was also remote. So like, I didn't have to like look into like the dead eyes of the people generating the data by playing 40 games.
It was hard in the Blizzard Arena because we all almost practice out of the Blizzard Arena as well. Yeah. And it was this like, it was very like studio offices where there's no windows. You'd just walk in at 10 a.m. and you'd walk out when it's nighttime. You're like, I don't know what year it is anymore at this point. It's just, it's all blurring together.
Yeah. So where do you think like is the sweet spot? Do you think that like this current iteration with the 16 game regular season is more healthy? I mean, obviously I think 40 probably a bit overkill by most sane people's kind of measure of a season.
I think in a perfect world, everyone would play each other once, right? So you'd play like, what is that, 19 games probably then? I think that would be ideal, but obviously we have COVID, we have regions, we have all that kind of stuff. Sure. I think if you're trying to like, if we are going to have these split regions and there's not going to be 20 teams, I think more towards 2024. I agree that 16 feels a little low, like losing one match is very hard, but also the schedule that it adds on top of that, right? Of like, we only play 16 matches. There's 12 teams in the North America. That means someone's going to have to play Dallas twice, while other teams are only going to have to play them once. And that's a massive boon for whichever team has that better schedule, I would say.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Especially like, it's 4 repeat matches. And I mean, we've talked about, I'm trying to figure out a way right now to properly measure strength of schedule, which is not always easy because, you're trying to compare like, if you're like a relatively good team, your schedule is going to feel relatively easy because you don't play yourself, and vice versa as well. So I'm not sure if there's like a great way to measure it. I'll have to count on like Captain Planet or Backpack Matt or one of the stats guys or IBM Watson, right? Like maybe that's IBM Watson's next big pull after the heroes is a strength of schedule. Maybe I'm gonna talk to Matt about that because that seems like a good IBM Watson thing. Like it seems like it's pretty confident in its picks. Like,
I think Watson is overwhelmed with how many stats there are that just exist in Overwatch right now. But it's like as it keeps going on, it keeps getting better, right? And like especially with the new hero things, like there's a lot of really cool things that are going to come out of Watson. I'm just hoping for a really good fantasy league next year that they just keep building it and you get something really sick that comes in the long run. But yeah, there's. I've talked to a lot of people about stats in Overwatch. Goomba is the primary one, and I don't know if you've ever talked to Goomba about statistics or like the algorithms that he likes to put together, but he's just, there's so much to break down and there's so many different variables and numbers aren't always the be-all end-all in a game like Overwatch as well, so it's very back and forth.
Oh yeah, definitely not. I had a conversation with like Yiska where he kind of like tried to hold my feet to the fire a little bit and was like, are stats actually relevant in Overwatch? And it's like there's no such thing as like an unasterisked stat in Overwatch, right? And it kind of goes back to like that basketball example. Like no stat exists without an opponent on the other side, and if you can't normalize for that, which we can't, like my favorite thing is like the Dragons in season 1 had the best healing stats of all time. Like no one will ever touch their 10 per 10 minute healing stats. They were insane. But like, does that mean that they were good?
No,
you tell me. Right?
I think we can all go back and look at that season 1, like Shanghai Dragons, just put an asterisk on it, just not use it as statistics and stuff like that. But also, like, it's patch changes as well, right? Like, we went from like let's use season 1 Hanzo for an example, right? Like, they literally completely overhauled his kit from season 1 going into the grand finals, and that had a massive influence over like how the game was played, and you can't statistically deal with that.
Yeah. No, absolutely. And also like metas, like Goat's meta, like how do you look at like I was pulling up with Striker's retirement, I was looking at like the like top damage leaders, and there were like some tank players in there. Like I think Sominsu was in there for like top
really?
5 damage per 10 minutes in all time, because he really only played Zarya in a meta where like Zarya was just eating tanks.
Yeah, constantly. Like 15k damage per 10, right? Like
per 10, and then like he hasn't really played outside of that, so he's kind of like this one like relatively small sample size of just insanely high damage output Overwatch. So yeah, stats are an interesting place. I think they're more of a like a marketing and excitement tool than they are an analytics tool. But who knows? Like there's some good ones. There's some good ones.
Yeah, that's for sure.
Yeah, so looking at like where we are in the season right now, I think so. I can't, if I pull it up, One thing that's been very interesting to me is how, and I'll pose this to you, how close do you think the current rankings of teams are to how strong teams actually are? Right. So if you like pull up like Wikipedia.
Are we looking at IBM Watson or the actual
like the actual
standings right now?
Standings with bonus wins.
Okay, let me pull it up. All right.
Yeah, so in the West, so we're looking at Dallas, Shock, Houston, Glads, Toronto, Justice, Boston, Paris, Atlanta, Florida, London, Vancouver.
I think we can all say without a shadow of a doubt, Atlanta Reign is just way too low in this, in the overall standings in the West. I think as much as, even when, like, from where I would say, regardless of their most recent June Joust performance, I think they've been very, very good. In just like, they lost the opening weekend to, like, they went 0-2 and everyone started yelling doom and gloom for Atlanta Reign again. But they're better than a 9th team. Like, they're at least, I would say, top 6. And I think Toronto, on the other hand, is a lot higher than I think they really deserve to be, but they have played 2 more matches and they did get 2 great wins. I'm not saying they're a bad team. I think there are teams below them that should be higher. I think you know, Washington Justice, you guys are 6th. You have theoretically on paper one of the best rosters in the league. Just haven't been able to get those wins.
Yeah, and I think the interesting thing for me is also the teams that, because I agree with you. I think Atlanta is lower than they should be. I think Florida is lower than they should be. But one thing that I kind of ask myself is how much of that is also like meta dependency. Because I think that like we've been a team that's been pretty heavily criticized for not having as strong a rush. But then like on the other hand, I would say that like Atlanta is one of those teams that like I'm probably recently biased. Oh, nice. We're getting some. I have.
Sorry, you got a little bit of bow on the corner.
No. I have I don't know if you know. I have a boxer mixed dude over here who there was a thunderstorm earlier, and so he was upstairs and he was crying and he was like pawing at the door. So he's down here sitting with me. So.
The good times. Yeah,
we could turn it into a pet stream. Yeah. But yeah, I mean, I think again going back to kind of the format of the season. If I look at just like raw strength, it does feel like there's some kind of knots in my stomach looking at the overall rankings. But if like the league is organized to reward flexibility, if you actually look at this from like 1 to 12 and you don't rank it as strength, but you rank it as like most flexible teams, it kind of works.
Yeah,
like the teams that like got pushed down towards the bottom are teams that just kind of like had really great rush. The teams in the middle had like maybe like are like the Justice. They had like a really great Winston comp, but maybe were like average or below average on another comp. Same with kind of like Toronto. And then as you get up towards the top, you get kind of like the Dallas, Shock, Houston, Glads, who I think have looked strong in every meta so far. And so I guess that's something that I was talking about. And tell me how you feel about this as far as the way the league has kind of changed over time. Is that like we really are trying to push for like this flexibility and this like the best Overwatch team isn't necessarily just like the best anymore. It's like we're kind of redefining what best is, right? We're trying to say like it is the most flexible almost.
And I think that's really important. I think that's what a lot of teams have been learning. We learned that lesson pretty well. I guess we unlearned the lesson during GOATS. GOATS became that composition where flexibility didn't matter. The only thing that mattered was how good were you at GOATS. And I think a lot of teams have built off of that, and they've gotten to the point where they're just like, well, we just need to get really good at one thing that we're really good at, and then they've run with that. And I think a lot of teams have been caught out this season with how rapid hero pools are coming through and how everything just doesn't always work. Flexibility is really important. And I talked to Gator recently for a roundtable that we did, and he said, as Atlanta Reign, we are heavily prioritizing being flexible at everything and being able to play everything, because you don't want to get to the playoffs and be like, well, this just isn't our meta, and then just lose and bomb out of the playoffs. You need to be able to play everything. And I think we can agree, if we get to, let's say we get to the playoffs and let's say Brawl ends up being one of the best metas in the league, well, all of a sudden there's a couple of teams in the West and a lot of the East that all of a sudden just can't compete with, your Houston Outlaws, your San Francisco Shock, your Atlanta Reigns and that kind of stuff, right? Like even Washington Justice. But on the other hand, if we end up in a Winston meta, all of a sudden a couple of other teams are really thriving. So I think there are some teams that are, I guess maybe Dallas Fuel is one of those where it's just like, we're just going to do what we do great and then hope it works out for us. And it has so far. But how long is that going to last for them? Is that going to work for them all the way through the playoffs? Because it would be the most Dallas fuel thing ever to get to the grand finals and then just have the wrong meta and the cycle of misery starts over again.
I mean, I do think that is like their insurance policy though, that they have like, if this point, if they had been like just good at the meta, I think maybe as like a Dallas Fuel fan, I might be a little bit more worried. But like, you're right. They've basically said like, okay, like the meta's cool, but like we're going to do this. And like they've done that multiple times now, and it's worked remarkably well multiple times. So yeah, I think, I don't want to jinx them either. And that's, I mean, that's the other crazy thing to me is I cannot imagine being a balancing dev for the patch going into the playoffs. No, like so far, I think it's actually been pretty good. Like nothing has felt like horribly broken. I think like May Melee was incredible variety. I think June Joust, we kind of like eventually coalesced, pun intended, to like the Neo Goats, what everyone was calling it. But I think, now that things have opened back up again, at least from like what we're seeing in scrims, a lot of different things are viable. We've seen people make making rush work into like a Winston comp and vice versa. So I think they've been doing a really good job so far, but it would be tragic if we get to like the playoffs and then all of a sudden like some corner case like I don't know, like Zarya Hog. Did that happen like last year? Like someone figured out like Zarya Hog worked.
That was you guys. What do you mean? That was you guys. You guys ruined everything. Everyone was like, oh, everyone's really skillful. The best teams are winning. This is great. And then Washington came through. It's like,
we're just like the 18th seed to the moon.
And like even Seoul had that. And I am a little bitter about these kind of things because that happened to us in 2018 when they completely overhauled Hanzo.
Yeah,
and Hanzo just became the most important hero. And, I love Brady, but his Hanzo wasn't Prophet, right? Yeah. So all of a sudden, London Spitfire went from being a really mediocre team, I think, like compared to the rest of the teams, to just Prophet just took over the game. Yeah. And it was frustrating for us because it's like, well, we can't do anything better. We just don't have as good of a Hanzo player. And I think they learned from that. Like every time I've talked to someone, they're like, yeah, we kind of messed up with a massive overhaul of a hero going into the playoffs. But, they lived and they learned. Like the Roadhog one, I don't think anyone could have anticipated that Zarya Roadhog would just be better than everything else.
A lot of people anti-anticipated it. A lot of people went to Twitter and said, this laughable comp, no one will make this comp work.
Exactly. Who laughed last, right? Didn't you guys finish like theoretically like third or something?
Yeah, third in NA. Yeah.
Wow. That's kind of crazy.
We took like a lot of flack for that, but I think it served a similar purpose to kind of what the patch resets and stage resets have been doing in the format this year. And that's one of the things that I like about it is that as a fan of most of the teams in the Overwatch League right now, you should just keep watching. Like who knows? Like Paris and Boston 3-0'd the Justice. Like if this was like any like other season, like by like the mid-season mark, you kind of know before the match starts, like, okay, like this is just this team where we're just gonna lose and I don't really want to turn it on, so I'll catch it on the VODs later. So I think that's kind of a little bit, that was one of the things that like, when just the hate was raining down on the Justice last season, I had my little candle of like, but like we are the hope for like other bad teams that like fans, don't abandon your team. Maybe you'll get the Decay signing in the meta. Like, who knows?
And like if you go back to season 2, right, like, and that was awful when we had Goats and it was just like, oh, this middle of the pack team is playing San Francisco Shock. Well, hope they have a better matchup next one because you just couldn't beat them in that. But we have so many different metas. As you said, Paris, I think, is a great example right now of a team that a lot of people didn't rate those players coming in, but they're actually very good at what they do well, right? I don't think Paris is going to become a top 5 team all of a sudden, but they have the potential to win matches over great teams. And like, I think we're all holding our breath for this Paris Eternal San Francisco Shock match that's coming up this weekend because I honestly don't know who's going to win. It's very much up in the air, so it'll be exciting to see.
I think it definitely helps viewership, and that's good for everyone. And Bo is
come on, buddy. No, not up here. Go on, jump down.
It's the cat tax, it's good. That's good for production value.
It's getting around food time. He's starting to get antsy on me. So.
That's awesome. But yeah, so I think, let's see, going into, so I think the back half of this season, I guess that's a question that I have for you. So we're now 1 week into the summer showdown. How do you think things are going to go through the rest of the season? Do you think it's going to continue to be, and this is kind of like one of the questions I've asked myself, is it going to continue to be like the last two stages, these like mini arcs, or do you think that, I think as teams are developing fundamentals beyond any individual meta, will they continue to kind of like get better and we'll kind of see some separation? Because right now I feel like that hasn't happened yet. I like to your point of like Paris and Shock, I feel like any other season we wouldn't be having this. Like if we look at a top 1 or 2 team playing like a lower middle pack team, we wouldn't be asking these questions. So do you think that's going to change over the course of the rest of the season, or are we going to just kind of have 3 more independent arcs between now and the end of the season?
I think with the hero pools from each tournament to tournament, it will stay very mini arcy. I think you'll get a good idea of which teams going into the playoffs have the best chance of adapting to the meta and, just being good at the end of the day. But I don't think like what happens here in the Summer Showdown isn't going to give me any more confidence for the teams going into the playoffs, right? We have there'll be like a month to 6 weeks between here and then. And I think that's just going to be really hard for teams to stay consistent, especially like a lot of players a lot of fans like to look at players and look at lower teams and they're like, oh, these guys are no good. There's no chance they ever win. All these players are actually very close and they're all very good at the game.
Yeah.
And the thing that divides them is usually like the little things of the team or the meta and that kind of stuff. And it's very easy for things like that to get flipped on their head. As you said, Decay gets inserted to the Washington Justice. They find a great meta for them. All of a sudden they go from 19th in the regular season to 3rd overall, right? Yep. And that's what can change with just like a little few flipper switches. So no one will know until the playoffs. That's sort of my answer in a short form.
Yeah. Do you believe in the 4-0 curse? That's another format question for you. That kind of there's like the gut reaction to it, and then there's like the what's going on there conversation behind it.
I don't think you can deny that it exists, but I think it's more of an onus on Dallas Fuel just wanting to stay 6th seed going into every single playoff tournament right now. Like they have never started as the 1st seed, but they've always been one of the favorites. Yeah. So I think it's just more that the top teams aren't performing the best at all times. Mm-hmm. And, 16 matches in a stage, I'm not going to throw one just so I don't have a 4-0 curse on me as well. So especially when you have to go to the like Hawaii or whatever it is or that kind of stuff, and you have to play against Shanghai Dragons and Dallas Fuel almost guaranteed. Like just take what you can get. I think for a lot of these, like Paris isn't throwing any of their matches today. If they can beat Shock, they're going to take it, and then they'll beat Vancouver. Yeah.
Yeah, I think the 4-0 thing I think is another one of the victims of just small sample size, right? It's just like, okay, so you won 4 games. I mean, if we look back on any previous season and just like took like a 4-game block and like ranked everyone based on that, and we showed that to people and we were like, oh, is this like how that season felt? They'd be like, hell no, like this that is in no way representative of what that season felt like. But like you're showing them and you're like, but look, they won 4 games in a row. It's like, what do you mean? Like, yeah,
that's good.
So for the 4, and this is I did not ask you to prepare this ahead of time, but if you could make 1 or 2 kind of format tweaks for next year, and this is also kind of, I guess, leading us into like the Overwatch 2 discussion that I want to talk about a little bit, but I guess leaving the changes that we know of, like the move to 5 players, like some of the map changes, leaving that out of the equation. What do you think we learned this year that you would change for format next year?
I think it's really interesting seeing how the teams are working on a 4-match cycle for stages, because as you said, it creates this very variable style, which is for better or for worse. But it also, I think you need to heavily consider what the league looks like after COVID, right? And then hopefully we get back to some semblance of LAN events, and like, what does that look like? And that's, like
the Justice was so cool, man. I was like,
it's just sad to not really have those kind of things. And like, I've been doing desk analyst for 1.5 years now, and I've still never done it in front of a crowd. I've only ever done it in front of green screens at this point. Yeah. So like, I just want to work some of these events, and I think it's going to be really cool. I don't know if what we were going to have in 2020 was going to be a good idea of how much they're going to travel. It's one of the reasons I retired, was just I can't justifiably go spend a month in China, then go to America for 2 weeks, and then go back to Canada, and then come back to America for a couple of weeks, and then go to Europe. Like, it was going to be brutal, and I think it would have been really interesting to see what would have come out of that season in terms of what the teams and the players and the fans said, because obviously homestands are great, and it would have been awesome for that, but it would have been hard. Like, we say a 40-match season is hard. Imagine adding, 20 games. If you had half the games but all the travel, it's going to feel 3 times as hard, in my opinion, because I've done a lot of traveling for events pre-OWL, and it weighs you down very quickly. And we've already seen issues in the past of like, Philly and San Francisco Shock went to the playoffs in, did they go to Korea or China last year? Yeah. They went to Korea, right? And they went to Korea and they said, we got set up at our hotels and they didn't have the ability to practice, right? Or like compared to the teams that were already in Korea, they are at a massive disadvantage. It's the same thing with the Hawaii situation right now of the Western teams have to travel to Hawaii and do this 5-hour flight, stay in a hotel, stay in suboptimal situations, while the Eastern region teams are just staying in their practice facility. They have a massive advantage on that, right?
And yet the Eastern teams have still managed to complain about it. We don't have to get into that, but that was mind-blowing to me. I was like, I don't know if you have a foot to stand on here. But, I mean, kudos to the Western teams for gutting it out. And also, it's very cool that it's the University of Hawaii, right? That's been setting them up. I mean, they prep most of the teams, like all of us, in the event that any of us make it to Hawaii, with like the way that's supposed to go down, and it's really tight. Like, it's really, really well planned. It's really well scheduled. It's I think as good as anyone could have hoped that it was going to be. Which, I mean, you see when the team, like the Western teams, are competing, and Dallas looked great. And I think the last the June tournament, June Joust final match was like one of the best games of Overwatch I've ever watched in my entire life. Like,
absolutely,
it
was so cool. Back and forth. The storylines were left and right. Like, it was incredible, and that's the whole point of it, right? I remember talking to Gator in the same situation where he was like, I understand there's not a great solution to this problem of we have to travel to Hawaii, but he was like, we were so done by the time we got to that match where they got blown out by the Shanghai Dragons. They're like, we didn't have anything left in the tank. Like, we were all really tired. We just couldn't do it. He's like, I'm glad we got the experience, but it would be cool if it was on a more even level playing field. But you can't argue with the results. That was an awesome match. It's better than last season where we're just like East versus West, like who's better? No one knows. And then we just we had like 3 matches at the end of the season to answer. It's like, well, we didn't really get a lot of great answers from anything. So it was kind of hard in that aspect.
Yeah, no, I've been really happy with that. I think, and I'm not sure, I haven't heard, so this isn't even like a leak because I haven't heard anything about it, but I know that like one of the questions that we had at the beginning of the season was when like COVID was really bad, was would we be able to get the European teams to Hawaii? Because like Europe had like really bad travel restrictions, and also just like, I mean, it was bad for Atlanta. Imagine how bad it would be for teams from Europe. And I mean, I think like
John's there, like just like I know I love you guys, but please, like John's looking at Paris this weekend, like we gotta putting on his little
San Francisco Shock hat, like go Shock. Like, I don't want to have to answer for this. So
I actually don't know what the plan is, because Paris look like they're gonna make it, and if they have a really good playoffs, like, and they qualify, which they potentially could if they get good seeding, like, I don't know what they're gonna do. That's a John problem, not a me problem.
Yeah, but I mean, but it has gotten better, right? Like, I know John tweeted out that like we recently got the visa process for getting folks into the U.S. I know Philly has now relocated. What was it, Funny Astro and Shockwave? Yeah,
I think EQO's there as well.
Yeah, so EQO got there like before like a bunch of other people. I think whatever he might have been in a different country that had like different restrictions than other people. But yeah, I think they have like almost like most of their team. But again, that's also like how long did that take, right? Was that like months of work to get them there, or was it like it was months of work, but from here on out they'll be like as quick as this? I don't know. Like, visas are nasty, man. So
I hate visas with so much of a passion. As an Australian trying to get into any other country, visas are the bane of my existence.
Yeah. So we'll see. Yeah, I think for next season, I think like what we talked about, like, I'm not sure how they're going to do the travel, but I like the idea of being able to play every team once, trying to, reduce some of the strength of schedule RNG of like where that puts you at the end of the season. I like it decreasing how much every game matters. Like the NFL, right? The NFL is a 16-game season, I believe. And that's one of those things where like basically every single game you lose, you have to kind of like come together as a team and be like, did we just knock ourselves out of the playoffs? And that is terrible. That sucks.
They're halfway through the season and they lost to a couple of bad teams. They're like, oh, okay, we'll run it back in next season, right? Like they just
time
know
to
that
take.
It's gonna be
Take
bad,
for picks.
Right? Yeah.
It's very, very high pressure every single game. And that's also kind of doubled down on by the double headers. And I want to get your opinion on that as well, because I've been like very pro double headers for basically this entire season, because last season I was one of the more vocal people that really didn't like when you happen to have a double header and someone else didn't. So then they got like the benefit of the video, they got the of like watching you the day before, so like you're not going to be able to hide or develop strats in 24 hours, and you're also like tired and whatnot. So I love the solution that, you know, everyone's a double header this year. I think that's great.
Yeah.
But then with 16 games, like we had a bad weekend, right? We made a bad call, and that was what, like, I'm not gonna do the math in my head, but that was a tangible percentage of our games in a 36-hour span, just gone.
It's just gone right there.
Yeah. So we'll see. It's again, that's another one of those things where it's like I've been in like the fantasy drafts for like I've done like football and basketball, not Overwatch. Maybe next year I'll do Overwatch and just draft the Justice so that I can have even more reason to cheer for the team. But like even like looking at like, you know, the coordination for like picks and building a schedule that way, I know it's not easy. I know it's not easy to try to build a season. And I think the double headers was like a quick, easy way to do it for this season. But I would love it if, either through more games or by spreading things out, if they could, make it just so that like, and I'm also like, I'm biased because like I still feel the sting of that weekend. I still have like the nightmares in my head of like just one bad weekend, and like it's the difference between, for us, like it's the difference between being 5-3 and 7-1, and like those are two teams that like we, in my opinion, we should have beat. And so like I feel like being a 7-1 team versus a 5-3 team right now, it feels different. So those would be I think good changes for next year, and also like super doable changes. I feel like I'm being a bit of a brat, like complaining about like things this year, because with the hand that Blizzard was dealt, I think that they're doing a pretty good job.
I think John's done a phenomenal job of putting this season together, given the situation of just everyone's everywhere, everyone's trying to do stuff with the server things, making it more balanced for teams playing against each other on ping has been incredible.
Mind.
Yeah, that virtual
I was
ping.
so ready. I was so ready for that to just be heinous. Like, and there was a lot of people that were like in like the pro forums, and they were saying like, when we play these teams in Europe, it's gonna be like a different game. Like, we're not even gonna be able to play the meta. Like if the meta is Rhine and we're playing a European team, like you don't play it because you're just gonna get you're gonna get shattered every time, and so it's gonna be a totally different meta. And it's been like smooth. Like I've played on it, I've watched it. Like the tick rate or like whatever black magic pipeline through the Atlantic Ocean that John got room on is working, and it's working great.
Yeah, and it's been really nice, like just being able to have those like these, given this whole situation, still have some level of like balance between the teams on high pings and stuff like that. Like we have teams playing from Europe, Korea, and North America, and we're somehow making it work in like the grand scheme of things. And the format is pretty good. I think they've done a great job of like the tournament structure. Like last season, we were like, no tournament structures, we're just gonna play regular season games, and we got like 6 games, and everyone's like, I'm bored. Like, and that's sort of like the issue that happened. And so we learn a lot from that. They build off the stages. They're giving a lot of like interesting things. I just hope it keeps going, right? And that, you know, I'm just fingers crossed that we go to the playoffs and something can happen in a live event. I want to work a live event. I think everyone would love to do a live event towards the end, especially with COVID restrictions seeming to ease up, at least in America.
Yeah,
so,
things are definitely getting better.
Crossed.
And I also feel like, you know, by the time that rolls around, like one of the countries, like some country is going to be in a good enough shape. Maybe it's not America, maybe it's Korea, maybe it's China, maybe it's Europe. Maybe Europe pulls the like reverse sweep, and everything just gets great there. I don't know, but like between the 4 countries, like someone's got to do it. Like 4 countries plus Hawaii. Someone's got to get it like figured out by like September or whenever it's gonna happen. So
and that's the fingers crossed, right? Because I think if it all came to a head, I think it would do very well for Overwatch, especially looking into next season.
Yeah, definitely. So looking into next season, I don't know that I've seen. I mean, you're not like an off-tank player, so I know you must not have had the hottest take upon seeing the Overwatch 2 news. But what was your like gut reaction? Did you put something out in the universe, or did you just kind of steer clear of that?
Yeah, I co-streamed it, and I like.
Oh, okay, nice.
I feel for the main tanks and the off tanks, whoever's like their role is getting reduced by 50%. That's going to affect them regardless what it is. I'm taking that idea away, and I'm just looking at the game as a whole. The game's not in a great spot. I think with 6v6, in terms of just the amount of shields, the amount of CC, just visual clutter in general, I think this season's shown us the most amount of visual clutter we've ever had. I think 5v5 is a great fix to a lot of those things, and it'll fix them all at the same time. And I think if they were ever going to make these drastic changes for Overwatch 2, this needed to be the time. And if I love, as much as it affects a lot of these Overwatch League players and a lot of people, and my tank synergy and all that good stuff, I think it's important to realize that this is not because they want to save money, like some people said. It's literally just because I actually think it's genuinely the best course of action and the best way forward, because it'll
it's a product. Like at the end of the day,
it's bigger than the Overwatch League. It's bigger than the players that it affects. It's bigger than the teams that it affects. It's going to be a good change. I haven't played it yet. I'm reserving judgment. Obviously, right. I have to try it and see it, and see good players play it as well. Until then, I'm cautiously optimistic. I think that's sort of where I am.
Yeah, I think we're in a very similar boat. Yeah, I had a lot of similar takes. Like when I was talking about it with folks, it was less visual clutter, easier to follow as a fan, easier to follow just even on stage, number of things to look at, it feels like when you stack that up against a tank player who's saying, but what about my job? That feels like not really a great comparison, but it's also something big something had to give, right? Something big had to change for Overwatch. I think it's a great game. I still think the Overwatch League is one of the most groundbreaking esport leagues in the world. I think, and I still think that they are the closest directionality wise to what I think the future of esports needs to be, and how it's going to kind of break through into being on ESPN and convincing someone this is something that you can throw some of your fan dollars at. So and I mean that's the GM side of me, right, as well. I'm always keeping an eye towards Overwatch League as a product. So I'm optimistic, cautiously optimistic as well. I also think that there are a lot of rosters that actually don't have to change much. And I think I don't want to have to eat my words later, but if you look at a team like the Justice, right, most teams are probably still going to keep 2 tanks, right? It's the same way that most teams right now have 3 DPS players, right? Even though there's only 2 DPS slots, right? Because the hero pool is so broad that it's pretty irresponsible to say I'm going to have one person that can play everything. And so we'll see how they redesign the heroes, but my hope is that we can still keep most of the people in the league that want to be in the league for their sake and for the fans' sake that have invested in these people as well.
Yeah, and not everyone can have a profit, right? And I think there's going to be, at some point, there's going to be a moment where it'll be interesting to see when it goes to 5v5 if tanks become a broad specialist, or if, as you said, you're going to have multiple tanks on your lineup just so that they can play different things, because we don't really know what it's going to feel like with the tanks. Are they going to be really overpowered? Are they going to be just those people that just get beat up all the time? We don't really know how that's going to happen with 5v5. Yeah, it can't get worse, right? Theoretically. But for 5v5, I think the thing that they said that it's excited me the most, and I think one of the biggest things that has happened in Overwatch over the last 5 years that has dissuaded a lot of people, is they're going back towards a more FPS style of the game. Because in Overwatch release, it was very, there weren't that many shields. It's a strategy game right now. There's very little FPS elements to Overwatch right now.
Oh yeah, where it is now versus where it started. Yeah.
From where it started, that difference right now. And I think they said we want to go back to that, and removing one tank is the first step in doing that, because it's how do we just remove all these shield tanks, and how do we remove all these shields, and how do we reduce CC and that kind of stuff. So I think they going back that way, and as much as some people might not like it, I think it's the best direction for the game once again.
It's what they've been asking for. It's out of one side of their mouth, they're the CCs, the shields, and then they're okay, so we're gonna get rid of a tank. And they're but why? It's that's kind of the cleanest way to do it. It just is.
I think it's funny as well, because tank players are oh man, my tank synergy. I'm what do you mean? They just told you that your role is going to become overpowered and you are not reliant on another person anymore. Tanks are going to be, I would assume, very, very strong in the game, and they're going to be important as a role player, because you're the only one on the field.
Right.
And they're the only one that can do a lot of things. So that should be really exciting if you're a tank player, because I think it also solves something that a lot of people love to complain about, is queue times. No one wants to play tank. Everyone loves to talk about, yo, don't remove our tanks. But then they're like, well, you play tank then. And they're like, no, I don't want to play tank. I want to play DPS. And then, well, okay, well, what are we going to do here then? So I think Blizzard's doing a great job. As I said, cautiously optimistic.
Yeah. Oh, and the other thing for the Overwatch League, and this is something like I had not earmarked for our time today, but like looking at the number of good main tanks in the league, like this was something that like the Justice struggled with in the off season. Like when we looked at, Roar, who's now coaching, which I'm super excited about, because he actually towards the end of the Justice season actually stepped up as a really strong coach. So I'm super excited to see him on, I believe, the Gen G Academy team now as part of like a big coaching push that they've done. So that's awesome for him. If anyone hasn't seen that, that's gonna be really cool. And Sweet. Then like we had to sit back and say, of the main tanks, and we went after Mag hard, but now Flora's in this situation. I think Albert did a great job of explaining that like there's not a lot of main tanks in the league, like, and for a variety of reasons, right? Because it's a position that gets it's like 50% of the time your job is just to take abuse. Like sometimes you get the Winston meta where you get to be like the cool guy that gets to be the man. Yeah. But like the rest of the time, it's kind of your job to just take a beating and get blamed when your team loses.
You have to be a masochist to be a tank player, especially a main tank player these days, because like we've all seen the clips of like getting frozen and then getting shattered and then getting like pinned and then getting like frozen again and all those kind of things. It's a never-ending cycle of CC, and it's something that like needs to be fixed. And as you said, like main tank players are hard. I think if I was the Mayhem, there's probably a couple of great options that they could try, especially if they want to develop talent going into 2022, but we're in a COVID world. They can't just get someone here right away. So I don't blame Florida. I don't know what's happening with OG, and I don't blame them for this decision. But at the end of the day, like it'll be interesting to see how it plays out, because it does not have a good track record of players moving to main tank. Like, what is it? Taimu, Jaehong, and Hydration, I think, are the three that have done it historically.
There was one more, because frickin' Sominsu had like 4 horsemen of the apocalypse, and it was like it was like Tayu, Jaehong, Hydration, and one more out there that like it's tough. So
main tank's a hard role. People underestimate how hard main tank is, and especially when you're going up against the best in the world, it's very easy to look very bad on main tank in an Overwatch League setting.
Yeah, and I think even so when we were talking, I mean, it's kind of reps back into when we were talking about like those arcs as well, like the mini arcs. Like one of the arcs that every team is trying to build is team synergy, and a core pillar of team synergy is your main tank. Like they are, even on a team where they are not necessarily the shot caller, like on many teams they are the shot caller. Like that is a fairly like main support, main tank are 2 very common shot caller roles, and even in teams where they're not the primary shot caller, a lot of metas, you're the Winston calling the dive, you're the Reinhardt calling like a rush, or you're calling a target. So you're not just like you're not just like swapping in a player that like like they mechanically can play the role. Like now you're restructuring your comms, you're restructuring your kind of approach to the game. So yeah, definitely not black and white. It'll be a challenge for sure, but I think a doable one. Like,
and that's the hard thing. I'm actually really surprised, and this is like a bit of a tangent, with how many teams, like you just said, like I think main tanks and main supports are the most important callers in the game, and I think they generally are the people that direct a lot of the flow of the game on almost every team. The number of teams right now that are just switching their main tanks and main supports around willy-nilly really surprises me. Like your Chengdu Hunters, who are going between Gaga and Among all the time, and then Nisha and Yveltal, and then you have the Houston Outlaws, who are trying to make Jake work on the main support from time to time, and now Dreamer and Django seem to be going back and forth. I am surprised, and I'm curious to see as the season goes on. Obviously, the Shocker, a team that popularized, we just play the best player at the time at that role, but I think that comes back to bite you in the butt every now and then, because at some point you need to sit on a bunch of players, keep the same calling strategy structure, and just like the players so you can get that synergy. So I want to see if like
shock, because I think that in my opinion, I think they were just running Moth, and like Moth like was the one constant, right, between like this kind of revolving door of like you play the Super or the Smurf, or you play the like X, Y, or Z. Yeah. And so and that's something, at least like for us, and that's part of why when we built our roster the way that we did, like our supports don't change because they can't. we don't have we have 2 supports, and we said like, you know, this is what we're riding or dying with, and so if we do make changes, at least we have, you know, like a stable core there. So yeah, we will have to see.
Yeah, well, hey, I hope it works out for you guys, because as I said, you guys got nothing but talent, and I had you guys high on my power rankings coming into the season. We just haven't really seen it come to fruition. So we're
a back half of the season kind of team, you know. Like, I do think we are. I do kind of track the long arcs for the Justice, right? And that is something that I think talent-wise, day one we were there. But even, especially I would say for like our rookie players, even though they were playing on like very competitive like runaway teams, there is a discipline and a like approach to the game that I think is a big jump for some players to make. And so we're a long-term team, right? Like I know like we came in excited too, and like I said, like we wish we were a 7-1 team instead of a 5-3 team right now.
But I would say the one redeeming quality that you guys 100% have is, as you said, you have no lack of talent. All you guys need to do is qualify for the playoffs at the end of the day. As long as you're seated in there, like you are one of the teams that can take it probably to any team in the league if your talent is playing to their full potential. So hey, as long as you make it to the end, like as you just keep trying to get some wins. So
yeah, I gotta bribe John to get that Hog Zarya meta. Like, you know what patch was really good?
Everyone loved it, right?
Everyone loved that patch. I really think like if it ain't broke, don't fix it. Let's just roll it right back.
Well, they keep trying to buff Hog. Every time I see them buff Hog again, I'm like, is this gonna happen again? Are we gonna end up in Rogue Zarya? Like
everyone likes that. Not chaotic at all, you know. That's a very castable, very followable meta.
Yeah.
Very cool. Well, we're coming up on the top of the hour here, and this has been perfect, guys. So thank you so much for joining us. Thank you again for the DC Brau for sponsoring this segment. And also congratulations. I threw you one before things started, but for anyone that doesn't know, Custa, newly engaged, making big life moves, you know, COVID not holding it back. So congratulations.
Well, if anything, embracing it in COVID and that kind of stuff. I got out of being a player and I was like, you know what, it's time to settle down a little bit. So, you know, going for the married man meta. Maybe I'll come back after I get married.
Get the weatherman job, you know, just hold down a good, decent job.
Maybe I should do some accent training. It'll really put me to the next level.
Some voiceovers. Hey, I mean, is there going to be an Australian character in Overwatch 2? If there is, and they give you the snub, I will be first on like the change.org petition for get them out. Like we have the guy right here. What are we doing?
Junker Queen. As I said, I can do it. I'm sure I can put on a great accent for Junker Queen. Blizzard, if you haven't done it yet, hit me up. I'll be around.
That's super smart. I would buy every. I'm on the record as buying every Junker Queen skin if voiced by Custa. That has to be. That has to be worth something, right?
Exactly.
Awesome. Well, thank you everyone in chat. I'm sorry we didn't get to too many questions in the chat. I'll probably go through some of these and maybe I can throw some of them up on Twitter if we have any questions about the Justice specifically. But this is just a fun chance to kind of recap the season. You know, we're a little over halfway for the Justice. We have our first matches, so make sure you guys are tuning in. Justice matches coming up on Friday and Sunday. I think this is our first not back-to-back doubleheader. Like,
that's nice.
Yeah, so we got like a day in between even to strategize a bit. So I think that'll be good for us. So make sure you guys catch those, and you'll probably catch Custa at the same time. So
I'll be there wearing a mustache in front of a weatherman board. So
hey,
I'll be there.
The mustache carries. The mustache meta is right up there. So
unfortunately, I can't grow any myself. So you know, I'll have to borrow yours at some point. Okay.
Sounds good, man. Thank you again. Thank you, chat. We'll see you guys again in a couple of weeks.